No one noticed the folder at first. Red, unlabeled, resting quietly on Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's desk as she sat motionless in the chamber. Cameras focused on Trump, his voice loud, defiant, swinging between talking points and scattered memories. But when AOC opened that folder, the entire room shifted. No gavel dropped. No one moved. Not even him. What she read wasn't a speech. It wasn't an accusation. It was documentation, signed, time-stamped, buried, revealing something no American was ever meant to see on live TV. Trump's jaw stiffened. His hand twitched. For the first time in hours, he went silent. And for the first time in years, so did the crowd. Disclaimer. While this story is a work of fiction, the emotions it evokes are grounded in truth. It is meant to provoke thought, stir conversation, and explore what power, accountability, and leadership really mean. Sometimes the facts we imagine say more than the ones we're told. Because in today's America, the most dangerous thing in a courtroom might be a woman with a folder she wasn't supposed to hold. The marble floors of the Capitol echoed louder than usual that morning, not because of footsteps, but because of something unspoken in the air. The kind of silence that presses down on the chest like humidity before a storm. Journalists gathered shoulder to shoulder behind velvet ropes. Boom mics hovered like vultures. Reporters whispered predictions, but none dared speak them too loudly. Everyone knew something felt off. The president, Donald J. Trump, was about to testify under oath, in person, for the first time in nearly 8 months. Not even his fiercest critics had expected him to show. And yet, there he was, walking through the hearing chamber doors with a stiff, uneven gait, jaw clenched, eyes scanning the room as if trying to place people he used to know. His legal team flanked him, overcompensating with confidence, but none of them could fully mask what the nation had been murmuring for months. Something wasn't right. The cameras rolled. Live feeds streamed across televisions in diners, airports, nursing homes, fire stations. America didn't know exactly what they were watching, but it felt historic. And then, she walked in. No entourage, no makeup crew. Just Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, dressed in muted navy, her hair pinned neatly back, carrying a single item under her arm, a plain red folder. No markings, no label, no seals, just red. Bright, defiant, and quietly unsettling. She didn't look at anyone. She didn't wave. She didn't speak. She simply took her seat at the committee bench and placed the folder, precisely deliberately beside her microphone. Her fingers hovered over it for a second, then pulled away, leaving it unopened. The chamber noticed. Trump noticed. He squinted at the folder, then glanced at one of his aides. No words were exchanged, but the tension between that glance and the silent object was immediate and electric. For the first 15 minutes, no one acknowledged the folder, but it was acknowledged. Every camera found its way to it. Every commentator speculated. Was it evidence? A statement? A decoy? Why hadn't she opened it? AOC sat still, her hands clasped, her eyes fixed on the witness chair. She hadn't spoken a word, but already she'd hijacked the narrative, and America felt it. Then Trump began to speak. His opening remarks were disjointed. Familiar phrases tumbled out. Witch hunt, total exoneration, perfect memory, but the coherence faltered. He repeated certain words, lost his place in his printed notes, chuckled at lines no one else understood. And through it all, AOC didn't blink. She didn't scribble notes. She didn't whisper to her colleagues. She just sat, breathing slowly, eyes unblinking, as if waiting for the exact moment the room would break. The folder remained untouched, still red, still closed. It was no longer just a folder, it was a fuse. One staffer would later tweet, "I don't know what was inside that folder, but I swear even Trump's voice changed when he saw it." Halfway through the testimony, as Trump paused awkwardly to sip from a glass of water he kept forgetting was there, AOC finally reached for the folder. And then, just as suddenly, she stopped. She didn't open it. She didn't speak. She just tapped it once, with her index finger. One soft tap that echoed more loudly in the chamber than any shout could have. Trump looked up. Their eyes met. Something in his expression flickered. Was it recognition, confusion, fear? And then, for just a moment, he went completely still. The room held its breath. The stillness didn't last long. Trump shuffled his notes as the first round of questioning began. His legal team leaned in on either side like bodyguards who knew the bullets wouldn't be physical. One by one, questions were lobbed. Softballs at first, the kind written to be caught, but even the soft ones were starting to roll past him. A senator asked about the COVID stimulus timeline. Trump blinked, answered vaguely, circled back, then referenced the vaccine rollout of 2017. A stir, subtle but unmistakable. Reporters exchanged side eyes. A congressional aide at the back started scribbling furiously, but he pressed on, undeterred. And when we passed the CARES Act in 2018, maybe it was 17, it doesn't matter. It was the biggest thing anyone had ever seen. I said that. You can look it up. Silence. Not disagreement, just disbelief. He chuckled lightly, searching for reassurance. His team didn't laugh. His allies didn't smile. The only sound was the muffled click of cameras focusing in. AOC hadn't moved. She sat still, spine straight, fingertips lightly pressed together. But behind the composure, something had changed. Her gaze narrowed, not like a hunter, but like a physician who'd just spotted something unexpected on the scan. She waited. Not for drama, for clarity. And then she leaned forward. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Mr. President, do you recall which year you signed the CARES Act? The air thinned. It was the way she said it, slowly, almost gently, like she was offering him a hand or a rope. Trump smiled at first. That's easy. It was, 2019. Wait, no, 2018. Yeah, it was right after the elections. We got it done fast. He paused and then gasps, small, involuntary, scattered across the chamber like popcorn on a hot pan, from the press row, from a few members of his own party, from the interns at the far back who had been told not to react no matter what. Because the answer wasn't just wrong, it was wildly wrong. The CARES Act was passed in 2020, the same year COVID-19 shut down the world, the same year the economy cratered and millions of Americans lost their jobs. For a president to misplace that date, it wasn't a gaffe. It was a red flag, a bright one. Trump froze, his lips parted slightly, eyes flickering as if replaying the moment in his mind. Then he muttered, "That's not what they told me." And that was worse. The microphones picked it up. The room heard it. America heard it. AOC said nothing. She didn't flinch. She didn't smirk. She simply reached toward the red folder again, not to open it, but just to touch it. That was enough. In that moment, power shifted, quietly, permanently, not with fireworks, but with a wrong answer, and a finger resting on what might be the next blow. From the hallway, a reporter whispered into her phone, "He's slipping," and she knows it. But AOC didn't look triumphant. She looked resolute, like someone who hadn't come to win, but to warn, like someone who knew that truth, once spoken, doesn't need applause to land. And the country watching live couldn't look away. The chamber held its breath. AOC, still calm, still composed, reached for the red folder. But this time, her fingers didn't just rest on it. She unclipped the fastener. The sound, soft, metallic, somehow cut through the entire room. It wasn't the opening of paper. It was the opening of possibility. The possibility that someone knew more. The possibility that she knew more. And that she had come ready. She didn't look at Trump. She didn't need to. She simply opened the folder, deliberately, page by page, without reading aloud. Her eyes skimmed. Her brow didn't move. But everyone in the room could feel it. Something had changed. On the floor, aides exchanged glances. A Republican staffer near the back began texting furiously. One screen read, "She brought docs," real ones, from inside. Another message flashed from the West Wing. "What the hell is she holding?" Inside the folder were 8 neatly labeled pages, tabs marked briefing, incident timeline, observations, internal memo, and then Final summary. That's where her hand stopped. AOC flipped to the last page. Just one, but its weight was crushing. Typed in clean black font, stamped with the White House seal, and signed by the presidential physician, it was a memo dated 6 weeks prior. And beneath the signature block, in bold, cognitive risk, ongoing concerns regarding executive memory retention, response consistency, and temporal disorientation. One phrase stood out like a siren. It had been underlined. High likelihood of cognitive decline inconsistent with sustained executive function. The room didn't gasp this time. It froze. AOC still said nothing. Her eyes traced the sentence again, once and only once. Then she placed the page face down, slowly, and looked ahead as if she'd just tucked away a piece of the nation's unfinished puzzle. Not to expose it yet, not to humiliate, but to let it exist, to let its presence speak louder than any accusation. Trump hadn't noticed. He was fidgeting, leaning into a whisper from one of his attorneys, who looked like he'd seen a ghost. He reached for his own notes, flipping them upside down, then back again, lost in his own outline. But the rest of the room had seen the word, cognitive risk. And the meaning didn't need translation. Inside the press booth, one CNN producer mouthed, "It's real." A journalist from the Times quietly deleted a pre-written headline and began typing from scratch. But AOC didn't strike. She didn't hold the page up, didn't wave it like a flag. She did something more powerful. She closed the folder, with precision, with intent, with silence. The act wasn't theatrical, it was surgical. A quiet reminder that truth isn't always shouted. Sometimes it's simply held. A red folder on a wooden table, closed again. But now everyone knew what was inside. And the fear didn't come from what she read. It came from what she hadn't read. Yet, in that moment, the question hanging in the air wasn't, is it true? It was, how long has she known? And that question, unanswered, was louder than anything else. It was past midnight. Rain hadn't started, but it was close. The kind of air that clings to your skin and warns you something's coming. Level 3 of a forgotten government parking garage. No cameras, no chatter. Just the sound of tires echoing off concrete and the slow tick of a cooling engine. A woman stood alone between two pillars, coat collar turned up, hood low. Her name wasn't known to the public, but inside the West Wing, she used to be called the eyes behind the schedule. She knew who was where, when, and more importantly, why. The moment AOC's chief of staff stepped out of the car, she didn't offer a greeting, just one line, sharp and cold. He once called the Secretary of Defense, Mike Pence, twice in the same meeting. No small talk, no explanation, just that, like a knife slid under armor. He nodded steady, but his hand tightened around his umbrella. She wasn't finished. There's more, a lot more. And if you don't say it, this country's going to be led by a man who thinks Easter happens in August. She opened a worn leather satchel. From inside, wrapped in plain brown paper and bound with a faded red ribbon, was the folder. The same one AOC would later bring into the hearing without a word. Read it once. No copies, no leaks. This doesn't go public unless you've got backup. He took it, but just before he turned away, she added one more thing, so quietly it almost drowned in the hum of the fluorescent light above them. I loved my job. I believed in it. But I don't believe in covering for someone who forgets he's holding power, not a golf club. Then she was gone, a soft click of heels fading into the darkness, swallowed by the echoes. Back in the car, he didn't open the folder right away. He stared at it like it might burn through the seat. On the outside, a label barely still clinging, for internal review only, WH Physician. That label meant this was real, not gossip, not rumor. Something that had been passed around the West Wing under hush, stamped confidential, then buried, and now it was sitting on his lap. A few minutes later, in a hotel suite just blocks from the Capitol, AOC sat cross-legged on a couch, eyes fixed on the door. She didn't pace. She didn't speak. When he arrived, he didn't need to say a word either. He just handed her the folder. She stared at it, fingers brushing the binding, then asked one question. "Do you believe what's in here?" His answer was slow, but certain. "I believe it's the most dangerous thing no one wants to admit." She nodded once, and then she did something no one else had dared to do. She opened it, not to leak, not to smear, but to understand before the storm. Because when power forgets itself, it's not the system that breaks. It's the people who have to live under the illusion that it still works. And in that quiet room with nothing but the buzz of a streetlight outside, a decision was made. This wasn't about revenge, it was about reckoning. The red folder lay open on the table like a wound. Inside, 12 pages. No headlines, no drama. Just the cold clarity of official language. Cognitive latency abnormal for age bracket. Advised further neurological testing. Recommendation, restricted executive function, pending reevaluation. Memo withheld under presidential directive for national morale. AOC sat motionless. Her fingertips rested lightly on the edge of the page, as if even touching it too long might set off alarms in the Capitol walls. There were signatures, doctors from Walter Reed, a White House medical advisor who mysteriously retired 3 months early, and even an aide's reluctant note scribbled in the margin. He asked if his own speech was today. It was today. This wasn't a tabloid accusation or partisan rumor. This was buried medical truth. Classified not because it was false, but because it was too true. She exhaled slowly, pressing her palms together like in prayer, except there was no peace in it, only weight. What if she read from this tomorrow? What if she didn't? Would the country see a leader crumbling or a woman weaponizing private pain? Would it be seen as bold or cruel? AOC wasn't afraid of criticism. She'd been called every name in the book. But this was different. This wasn't about policy or power. This was about capacity. A man entrusted with the nuclear codes who forgot what month it was, on camera. She stared at the final page. One word was circled in red by hand, not typewritten. Decline. Suddenly her phone buzzed. Not a news alert, not a message from staff. A reminder. Tomorrow, oversight hearing, room 2141, 9 a.m. Trump testifies in person. She looked around the room, papers, books, a coffee gone cold, the hum of traffic outside muted by Capitol glass, and then she whispered the question that no law book could answer. Is it ethical to remain silent if silence props up a lie? Her hands trembled, but not from fear, from clarity. This folder didn't belong to her. Not really. It belonged to every American who'd ever trusted a system to protect them from leadership unfit for its burden. She didn't need to embellish. She didn't need to destroy. All she had to do was reveal. But not yet. Not now. Because timing, like truth, demanded discipline. She placed the documents back inside. Neat, respectful, as if even truth deserved to be handled gently until the world was ready to hear it. The lock on her briefcase clicked shut, and outside, unnoticed in the hallway, 2 aides whispered. They hadn't seen what was inside the folder, but they saw something else. Her eyes had changed. Not angry, not emotional, focused, like someone who'd seen a lever big enough to move history, and was deciding whether to pull. It began with a podium and a lie. The White House press secretary, flanked by flags, reporters, and the tension of a country on edge, stepped up and smiled like nothing was burning. "We've reviewed the claims being circulated," she said crisply. "And let me be absolutely clear. These so-called documents are fabricated, completely fake, a desperate stunt." But her voice had a hitch, not panic, just the kind of careful, rehearsed confidence that only appears when truth is no longer an ally. Inside the briefing room, reporters stiffened. A few exchanged looks. One whispered into his phone. CNN ran the statement live. Newsmax called it reassuring. Fox waited until that page surfaced. Just one. But it was enough. A single scan, leaked not by AOC, not even her staff, but a third source. An anonymous upload to a protected server, shared first with an overseas journalist, then reposted by an independent watchdog account. It bore the seal of the presidential physician, dated, initialed, and beneath the letterhead, a signature that couldn't be denied. Donald J. Trump. The document read like routine clearance paperwork, until the last line, subject's memory recall exhibits instability inconsistent with stress or fatigue. Recommendation, ongoing observation, full disclosure to appropriate officials. The internet exploded. Within 20 minutes, hashtags trended. Presidential fitness, Josh, cognitive cover-up, just the folder is real. That's when Fox News paused. No denial, no spin, just a panel in silence, looking at the page. Then came the tweet, from AOC's verified account with a single image. The red folder closed, her hand resting lightly atop it. No flame, no fire, just 5 words beneath it. This isn't about politics. She followed with another post, more direct, more human. It's about what we let power hide. If truth threatens stability, maybe we've built the wrong kind of stability. The replies came in floods. Teachers, nurses, veterans, some angry, some afraid, but many grateful. Thank you for not letting this disappear. We deserve to know who's making the decisions, and if they still can. Not about left or right, it's about real or fake. The White House scrambled. Within the hour, an emergency meeting was held. The president's legal team rushed into private chambers. No cameras were allowed, but one aide was overheard whispering, "He doesn't remember the memo." By midnight, 3 things were clear. The document was real. No one knew how many pages existed. And AOC still hadn't read a single word out loud. Yet she'd already changed the conversation, not with volume, but with restraint. Not by leaking secrets, but by daring the nation to ask why they were secrets in the first place. And that's when the tide shifted. Cable panels began to shift their tone. From baseless smear to we should verify. Polls flickered. Trust wavered. Voters didn't know if they believed the memo yet, but they believed something was off. In one quiet interview, a former cabinet member, anonymous, voice altered, offered only this. "You think the folder's the scandal? You haven't seen what it stopped her from saying." And just like that, the folder went from evidence to symbol of what we should have known, of what we chose not to ask. Because in a world saturated with noise, AOC had done something rare. She let the truth echo before giving it a microphone. It didn't come from a newsroom, not from Capitol Hill, not even from one of AOC's speeches. It came from a kitchen in suburban Ohio, where a mother, hands still dusted with flour, sat in front of her phone camera and pressed record. Her name was Linda Carrington, a retired school counselor. 68, silver curls, a soft cardigan, and behind her, a pot bubbling on the stove. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. I watched the hearing with my husband. I wasn't watching the folder. I was watching the man, and I saw that stare. She blinked, collected herself. My son was diagnosed at 47, early onset dementia. First it was little things, like not remembering the route to his office, then names, then birthdays. And finally, sitting at dinner one night, he looked at me like I was a stranger. Her hands trembled for just a moment. That's the look President Trump gave when AOC asked the CARES Act question. The video was just under 4 minutes. But by the 5th hour, it had crossed 1.6 million views. By the next morning, it had been shared by nurses, social workers, memory care specialists, and, quietly, members of Congress from both parties. The comment that echoed most wasn't political. She gave our silence a microphone. AOC reposted the clip with only one line. This isn't about who leads. It's about whether they can. And for the first time in weeks, the conversation shifted from left and right to right and wrong. Linda's words hit where no headline could, because it wasn't about policy. It was about recognition, the kind that creeps in slowly and stays like a lump in the throat. Her message didn't attack. It exposed, not Trump, but the collective hush we pretend protects dignity, when in fact, it protects denial. In the hours that followed, more videos poured in. A firefighter in Arizona. That pause, that repetition, I've seen it in my chief. It broke my heart to see it again. A nurse in Georgia. I've trained to spot micro missteps. He showed at least 3 on that stand. A former Marine. This isn't weakness. It's a medical condition, and ignoring it is weakness. Suddenly, the red folder wasn't just a folder, it was a mirror, and AOC had held it up to a nation that flinched. The White House issued no new statement that day, but an aide close to the inner circle leaked one chilling line from an internal memo. Public empathy is a more dangerous trigger than partisanship. Linda, unaware of her viral reach, ended her video the same way she started. Simply. She patted the camera to turn it off, then said softly, almost as if to herself, "It's not about taking him down. It's about letting the rest of us speak up." The camera clicked off, but the echo had already begun, because truth doesn't always arrive in a press release. Sometimes it walks in quietly, pulls out a kitchen chair, and says, "That's what I saw too." No one expected her to show up. Not to that podium, not on that day. The press thought it was another scheduled statement from the office of the former First Lady, maybe about a literacy initiative or a charitable appearance. But when Melania Trump stepped out alone, with no spokesperson, no introduction, and no flag backdrop, just a single white microphone at waist height, something shifted in the air. She didn't look at the cameras right away. She looked down, then she looked through the lens. "I was told to support, not to speak." Her accent wrapped around every syllable with the sharpness of someone who had chosen each word carefully, deliberately. The room stilled. "He forgot Barron's name. That was 2 years ago." Gasps, audible. Not from the press pool, but from America, watching live. "I thought it was stress. I asked the chief of staff if someone could help him, evaluate him. They told me to smile, that if I loved him, I would not make him look weak." One breath. Now that's all she took. But love is not silence, and silence is not loyalty. The silence that followed was not empty. It was reverence. For the first time, someone inside the inner circle had confirmed what millions had only dared to whisper. "I do not speak for politics. I speak for mothers, for wives, for women who have had to watch someone they love forget the names of the people they love." She paused. "This folder," she held up a printed copy of the document AOC had revealed, the same signature in blue ink visible at the bottom, "was never supposed to exist outside the West Wing. But if we allow health to be hidden for power, we are not a country, we are a stage." She did not cry. She did not smile. She simply said, "I hope history is kinder than politics. I hope my son understands why I chose to speak now." And then she stepped back. The reporters didn't shout. They just stared, because in that moment, truth had stepped forward in heels, not headlines. Within 10 minutes, the video had more shares than any post from the GOP that month. Within 2 hours, AOC had reposted the clip with a caption, "Courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just refuses to be quiet." That evening, political anchors struggled for language. Fox hesitated. CNN replayed it every hour. NBC opened with it. Even 60 Minutes shifted their segment to cover the fallout. What mattered more wasn't what Melania said, but what she confirmed. That the folder wasn't fake. That the moment on that debate stage, when Trump fumbled a date, when he blanked, wasn't an isolated stumble. It was a pattern. One seen by those closest. One dismissed because optics ruled over ethics. And now the American public had a name for it. Not just fitness, but neglect. Neglect of duty, of clarity, of transparency. That night, AOC appeared briefly on a live stream. She didn't gloat. She said only, "I didn't ask for her voice, but I'm glad history made space for it." Because sometimes the most powerful witness is the one who was told to sit quietly for far too long. It didn't take long for the dam to break. By the next morning, CNN was calling it what millions were already hashtagging. Number sign Foldergate. On-air anchor Jake Tapper looked visibly unsettled. This isn't just a political earthquake. This is an institutional reckoning. And it was. Across cable networks, there were no more talking points, just stunned silence broken by hurried speculation. The footage of Melania's press conference looped like clockwork. Analysts leaned in. Legal experts revised themselves live on air. One Fox News contributor whispered mid-broadcast, unaware his mic was hot, "We should have seen this earlier." And that's what haunted people. It wasn't just that the folder existed. It wasn't just what it contained. It was that everyone who mattered had either ignored it or protected it. The White House scrambled. Aides deleted tweets. Former cabinet officials released vague statements filled with verbs that meant nothing. No one wanted to be on the wrong side of what was coming next. Meanwhile, the woman who started it all said nothing. AOC disappeared from view for 48 hours. No interviews, no tweets, no leaked audio. Just the same photograph posted across her official accounts on the second morning. One image, a plain red folder on a congressional desk, slightly opened, casting a long shadow across the wood grain. No caption, but that was the point, because by now America knew exactly what was inside. The post shattered records, over 5 million shares in 24 hours. People printed it out, students made posters, activists projected it onto buildings in D.C., New York, and Seattle. It wasn't a policy speech, it was a symbol of how one sliver of truth could hold up a mirror to a system that had learned to lie with a straight face. At The Atlantic, an op-ed went viral. It wasn't a scream. It wasn't even a voice. It was a folder, and it told the truth better than a press secretary ever could. Meanwhile, Trump's allies were fracturing. Some, like Senator Tilson of Kentucky, doubled down. This is character assassination, a smear job. But others? They blinked. Congressman David Wexler, who had once dismissed AOC as a TikTok socialist, told NPR, "If this folder is real, and at this point I believe it is, then it's not about left or right anymore. It's about what we're willing to overlook just to keep someone in power." And just like that, the tectonic plates shifted. The next night, Anderson Cooper opened with a rare admission. Journalism didn't fail, but perhaps we waited too long to follow the silence. In private groups, strategists whispered about contingency plans, 25th Amendment scenarios, and whether a medical inquiry could be launched without triggering civil unrest. But in public, AOC stayed quiet, and that silence, it was thunder. She didn't need to speak. She had already done what few could. She had held up the truth without dressing it up for applause. She didn't weaponize it. She didn't dramatize it. She revealed it, and let America decide whether or not it wanted to keep pretending. Because sometimes the loudest moment in history is the moment no one dares say anything at all. By dawn, it wasn't advisors speaking for him. It was Trump himself, uncensored, unfiltered, and furious. He took to Truth Social like a man cornered, fingers slamming the keyboard faster than his mind could catch them. The post landed at 5:03 a.m., written in full caps, riddled with typos. "She forged the whole thing. Fake doctors, fake folder. I'm sharper than ever. I scored 35 out of 10 on my cognitive test." And with that, the internet detonated. Memes spread like wildfire. 35 out of 10 trended across platforms. TikTok creators acted out the imaginary test, with questions like, "What color is Thursday?" and "Spell president backwards while juggling loyalty pledges." Even conservatives winced. Even loyalists blinked, because the anger wasn't reassuring. It was rattling, and it didn't stop. He followed up an hour later. "This whole folder hoax was made up by AOC, who is not even a real congresswoman. Ever notice how she never shows her ID?" That one triggered Fact Check Friday by Thursday. Then came the campaign's move, an emergency upload from Mar-a-Lago. They dropped a grainy, low-resolution video allegedly showing Trump answering basic questions with flying colors. But the audio was delayed, the room too dark, the paper he was reading from clearly pre-printed with answers. His voice cracked. He kept looking off screen. At one point, the video zoomed awkwardly into a cue card labeled, "Correct answer, giraffe." The campaign had tried to prove competence. Instead, they'd confirmed doubt. Mainstream media ran the footage side by side with the red folder image, and the comparison was brutal. Clips of Trump stumbling over the name of his own former chief of staff surfaced. Twitter sleuths dug up 5 instances in 1 month where he'd called reporters by the wrong names, or paused mid-sentence to blink, seemingly lost. But the worst part? He wouldn't stop. "I can still nuclear anyone I want. Watch your step, crooked AOC." That one didn't trend. It chilled. National security analysts weighed in. Psychologists gave restrained interviews on executive function under stress. And all the while, AOC said nothing. Her silence was deliberate and excruciating. Every hour she didn't respond, the folder spoke louder. Every tweet from Trump, every wild defense from his inner circle, only echoed against the weight of what she hadn't said yet. This wasn't about ego. It was about exposure. The kind that no press conference could undo. The kind that didn't need punchlines or podiums. Just one fact too obvious to laugh off. In Ohio, a school principal posted, "If a kid turned in a video like that to prove they passed, we'd ask if they were okay." Why are we asking less from a president? AOC reposted it to her story. No comment. Because the truth didn't need decoration. It needed patience. And America was finally listening without distraction. What began as a meltdown had morphed into a spotlight, trained not just on one man, but on a whole ecosystem that enabled him, excused him, cheered him even as he unraveled in plain view. And through that unraveling, a new kind of leadership emerged. Not one powered by rage, but by restraint. AOC wasn't throwing punches. She was holding up a mirror and letting a nation see itself. Sometimes that's the most dangerous act of all. Florida had never seen a crowd like this. 20,000 people sweating under the stadium lights, chanting USA, USA, and waving flags not just with stars, but with Trump's face emblazoned across them. He was late, of course. He always was. That was part of the theater. The long wait, the rising tension, the music swelling just before the man appeared like a monarch beneath lasers and smoke. And when he finally walked on stage, the roar was thunderous. He began like he always did, railing against immigrants, against socialism, against that young congresswoman from New York. AOC wasn't named, but her silhouette loomed in every insult. The crowd loved it. At first, then, something shifted. 15 minutes in, mid-sentence, Trump paused. He blinked, looked down, looked up again. "It's great to be back in such a wonderful state. I love Michigan." Silence. Not confusion, not laughter. Just cold, glassy silence. Like a stadium full of people had just had the same thought at once and didn't want to be the first to say it. He was in Florida. He tried to keep going. Something about record-breaking this and tremendous that. But now the swagger had cracked. He trailed off again, slurred a phrase, looked off stage like someone might save him. No one moved. It was over in less than 90 seconds. But it felt like eternity. And across the country, in a quiet war room in D.C., AOC's team watched it live. They didn't gloat. They didn't cheer. They got to work. Within 20 minutes, they uploaded a 10-second video to her official X, formerly Twitter account. It was simple, stark, side-by-side frames. On the left, Trump at the podium, mouth open, eyes vacant, mumbling the name of the wrong state. On the right, a close-up of the red folder. No sound, no caption, no theatrics. But the meaning was deafening. The clip spread like a digital virus. Millions watched within hours. News anchors scrambled to get the footage cleared for air. Body language experts were called in. Doctors too. Overnight, hashtags like #, cognitive crisis, and #, where is he trended globally. Even Fox News didn't know how to spin it. By morning, the Wall Street Journal had run a front-page headline, "The Florida Freeze, is the president fit?" And something deeper had begun to fracture. This wasn't a hot mic or a gaffe. It wasn't about policy. It was about presence. About a leader who had long painted himself as invincible, now revealed to be fragile, unsure, mortal. The myth was cracking. In a diner outside Jacksonville, a man in a Trump 2024 hat stared at his phone, watching the clip on repeat. His wife leaned over and whispered, "You ever seen him like that before?" He didn't answer, because everyone had seen what they weren't supposed to see. And once you do, you can't unsee it. In her Capitol office, AOC finally spoke. Not on camera, not in a press conference, but to her team, quietly. "I didn't want to break a man," she said, "but I also won't help a country lie to itself." Outside her door, reporters waited, but she didn't come out. She didn't need to, because sometimes the most powerful message isn't a speech. It's a mirror, held up at just the right moment. And this time, America couldn't look away. By sunrise the next day, Capitol Hill had turned into a battlefield, but not the kind with banners and chants. This one was silent, cloaked in whispered phone calls and hallway glances that lingered too long. Inside the marbled corridors of power, something had cracked. Republicans were splitting. Some, especially the firebrands, raced to condemn AOC. On Fox and Friends, a congressman from Texas snarled into the camera, "This isn't oversight. This is assassination by innuendo. She's cruel, calculated, and dangerous." But the word cruel didn't land like it used to, because in back rooms, in hushed committee offices, others weren't shouting. They were sitting in silence, reading the leaked documents line by line. The signature of the presidential physician, the phrase cognitive risk, the damning assessments marked classified for national morale, and slowly the questions began. Not about politics, about liability, about legacy. In one private meeting between GOP senators, a longtime conservative stood up, his voice shaking not with anger, but with shame. "We all saw him freeze. We all saw the folder. What we do now, that's going in our obituaries." No one clapped. No one argued. They just stared at the table, where someone had scribbled 2 words on a legal pad. 25th Amendment? By afternoon, the whisper had become a consideration. News leaked that Vice President Harris had been contacted by members of both parties, not to discuss strategy, but procedure. Even some Trump loyalists, quiet names from purple states, had asked to understand the legal thresholds. In public, though, the mask stayed on. Conservative influencers mocked AOC's performative folder. Pundits insisted this was all an act, a distraction from Biden's economy, from border numbers, from real issues. But none of that changed the footage. The blank stare, the slurred sentence, the name of the wrong state, and worst of all, Melania's voice, now looped on every major news station. "He forgot Barron's name. I asked for help. They told me to smile." Even the base didn't know what to do with that. And AOC, she wasn't talking. Not at rallies, not to reporters, not even on X. She didn't have to, because every screen in America had shown the same collapse. And every living room was now a courtroom, each voter silently deliberating, "Is he okay? Is this okay?" That evening, CNN's Anderson Cooper sat down with a former Republican House Speaker. Off script, mid-segment, the retired politician shook his head and said, "She might be the conscience we ignored." For too long. That quote alone went viral. 1,000 think pieces bloomed overnight. Polls began shifting. Independents leaned away. Senior citizens, long a stronghold for Trump, started citing concerns. The phrase mental clarity now polled above tax reform in voter priorities. And through it all, behind her locked office door, AOC reread the folder for the 100th time. Not to celebrate, not to rehearse, but to remind herself that this wasn't vengeance. It was accountability. When a staffer entered, wide-eyed with breaking updates, AOC simply said, "I didn't make him forget. I just refused to pretend he didn't." Outside the Capitol, a protest sign appeared, painted in bold strokes. "Power doesn't need protection. Truth does." And deep in the West Wing, aides to the president were no longer speaking in hypotheticals, because the conversation had finally shifted. From "what will she do next?" to "what are we willing to ignore?" The old Union Hall in rural Ohio hadn't seen a crowd like this in years. The last time every folding chair had been filled, the factory 2 miles down the road was still open. The town had once been known for steel. Now it was known for cancer clusters and a rail line no one wanted to talk about. But tonight, something different filled the air. Not hope exactly, more like curiosity and tension. Then she walked in. No entourage, no music, just Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez in a simple black coat, carrying one red folder. She didn't take the podium. Not right away. Instead, she walked up to the stage with quiet determination and placed one object at its center, a single empty chair. There was no nameplate, no spotlight, just that chair, plain, metal, a little scuffed at the legs, and the sudden shift in the room's energy. When AOC finally spoke, her voice didn't boom. It didn't need to. "This chair," she said, "represents every family whose truth was ignored. Every mother who knew something was wrong but got dismissed. Every veteran who forgot a name and was told to rest. Every child who got sick from poisoned soil and was handed paperwork instead of help." A silence settled, the kind that clings to the skin. She didn't mention Trump. Not once. She didn't have to. People in the room had seen the viral clips. They'd heard about the folder. They watched the rally video, Trump stumbling over what state he was in. They remembered Melania's voice, and now they were staring at that empty chair as if it had begun to speak. A man in the back, flannel sleeves rolled up, crossed his arms. He'd voted red every cycle, but something about that stage, the way it refused spectacle, the way it accused without words, made his throat tighten. Then came the first voice from the crowd. A woman stood up, mid-40s, worn face, hands calloused from work. "My dad died last year," she said. "They told us it was his time, but we'd been seeing the signs for months. Confusion, anger. He couldn't remember our birthdays. The VA said it was just age, but it wasn't." She pointed to the chair. "That was his seat, wasn't it?" AOC nodded, not as a politician, as someone who understood loss, not just of life, but of truth. Soon, another voice, then another. Stories began unfolding like loose pages from the same book. Ignored symptoms, medical gaslighting, workers told to shut up, spouses told they were overreacting. One man whispered that his uncle had once been dismissed from a job for mental fatigue. No one had connected it to the chemicals near the plant, until now. "That folder you held," someone said, "made us feel seen." AOC's eyes scanned the room. She let the silence breathe. "I didn't come here to win you over," she finally said. "I came because if we keep pretending power equals wellness, we'll keep handing the wheel to people unfit to steer." Somewhere near the front, an elderly man clapped once. Then slowly, others joined. Not in a frenzy, in recognition. And still, the chair sat there, unmoving. A monument to what had been missed. A mirror no one wanted but couldn't ignore. Outside, as the meeting ended, a local reporter asked AOC what she hoped would happen next. "I hope America stops asking, 'Who's yelling loudest?' and starts asking, 'Who's hiding the most?'" By morning, that image, the chair, the folder, the faces in the crowd, was everywhere. And in homes across America, people weren't just watching anymore. They were remembering. The room had begun to quiet down. Stories had been told, some with trembling voices, others with clenched fists. But then a man stood up from the back, and the hush that followed was different. He didn't need a microphone. His silence commanded the floor before he even spoke. Tall, squared shoulders, decorated cap in hand, eyes like steel. His jacket bore the insignia of the 82nd Airborne. His gait was slow but sure, like someone who had walked through more than just war zones. He stepped to the mic, cleared his throat once. "My name is David, Sergeant, retired." No applause, just stillness, reverence. "I served under 3 presidents. I've saluted Republican and Democrat alike. I never once cared about the color of the tie, only the strength of the oath." People leaned in. "I swore to protect the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. But lately I find myself asking," he paused, swallowing something thick behind his voice, "what protects us from a confused commander?" You could feel it then, the shift, not political but personal, like someone had just cracked open a hidden door. "I know what dementia looks like," he continued, steady now. "My father died with it, a proud man, reduced to staring at cereal boxes like they were puzzles. He forgot where he was, sometimes who he was. And I watched that same look in the president's eyes last week, not once, twice. On live TV, someone in the front gasped softly. A camera clicked in the back, but no one moved. This isn't about disrespect, it's about reality. If I'd been that confused on the battlefield, my brothers wouldn't have made it home. Decisions made in that state, they kill people, slowly, quietly, But they do. He looked toward AOC. She didn't nod. She just listened, completely respectfully. This wasn't her moment. It was America's. We all want to believe our leaders are unshakable. But what good is loyalty to a man if it costs us loyalty to the truth? Someone wiped tears. A few stood. Still no slogans, no chants, just gravity. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something unexpected, a folded flag pin. Held it up. I earned this, but lately I don't wear it. Not until we stop treating politics like a game and start treating mental clarity like national security. And then, almost as if rehearsed by fate itself, he turned to the empty chair on stage. If no one else will say it, I will. That chair isn't just a symbol of families who've been ignored. It's a warning that if we don't take truth seriously, that seat could end up costing us everything. He placed the pin on the edge of the chair, just sat it there, and walked away. No cheers, just tears. Because deep down, every person in that hall knew this wasn't theater. It was testimony from someone who had seen what confusion looked like in real time and understood the danger of pretending it wasn't there. Outside, the wind picked up. Inside, a nation's doubt had just taken human form. And when AOC finally stood to speak again, she didn't need to raise her voice. She simply whispered, "Sometimes the most patriotic thing we can do is stop pretending." And the room, once more, rose to its feet. It began with a single photo, one empty chair under a spotlight, alone on a wooden stage in a rural gymnasium in Ohio. No caption, no slogan, no press release, just an image. Simple, stark, unforgettable. Within hours, the image traveled. Not as breaking news, not as propaganda, but as something more dangerous to power, a mirror. Someone on X posted it with a single tag. Number sign the empty chair. The phrase caught like a match on dry brush. By sunset, it had already trended in 12 states. By midnight, it was the top global hashtag. The chair had become a symbol, not of absence, but of what had been denied. Truth, vulnerability, responsibility. And the fact that AOC said nothing only made it louder. No interviews, no speeches, no doubling down. Just silence. But others picked up where she left off. In Colorado, a freshman Democrat rolled one lone folding chair onto her town hall stage and said, "This is for the veteran who cried last week and asked us to stop pretending." In Nevada, an independent senator set out two chairs, one for truth, the other for consequences. Then came the community halls, the teachers' unions. A city council in Michigan replaced the mayor's podium with a chair. Even a church in Atlanta placed an empty chair beside the altar, their sign reading, "We all know someone who's been silenced." Fox News scrambled. "It's political theater," one pundit barked. But it didn't land because nothing was being said. That was the genius. The weapon was silence, and it couldn't be refuted. And people kept showing up, to listen, to ask, not just about Trump, but about their parents, their neighbors, the systems that had looked away too many times. For the first time in a long time, it didn't feel like a partisan moment. It felt like a reckoning, led not by a campaign, but by a question. Who gets to speak when truth is inconvenient? The movement didn't need leaders. It needed witnesses, and America suddenly was full of them. Videos of children asking about the chair that makes grown-ups cry went viral. A retired nurse in Minnesota brought a chair to a school board meeting and said, "This is for the patient whose chart I was told to shred." In Boston, subway ads were graffitied with folding chairs drawn in black marker, always facing away, always facing out, as if watching us. Late-night hosts couldn't mock it. Morning anchors couldn't spin it. They could only ask, how did one chair speak louder than a president? Because it didn't ask for trust. It demanded reflection. In D.C., the pressure mounted. The administration tried to distract, pivot, rally, but the image lingered. Every time Trump appeared on screen, someone would repost that photo. No caption needed. It haunted every denial. It followed every tweet. Because it wasn't AOC speaking anymore. It was us. And still, she said nothing. She didn't need to. Sometimes the most dangerous revolution is the one without a bullhorn, just a symbol, quietly set in place. And by the time CNN ran its headline, "The empty chair heard round the world," it was already too late to stop it. The headline dropped like a hammer. Trump sues AOC for defamation in Foldergate fallout. Cable news lit up. Social media caught fire. On Truth Social, Trump thundered, "She weaponized a lie. She's trying to rig an election. I will see her in court." The post was in all caps, of course, and ended with the usual flair. SAD. For 48 hours, the media swarmed AOC's office. Would she respond? Would she fold under legal pressure? She didn't flinch. Instead, she stepped out of her office in a calm gray blazer, walked up to a microphone, and simply said, "Litigation doesn't scare me. Silence scares me more." The lawsuit itself was a spectacle, filed in the Southern District of New York, claiming emotional distress, reputational harm, and malicious intent. Trump's lawyers argued that the folder contained manipulated documents and that AOC had intentionally crafted a media frenzy to damage his re-election campaign. But there was one problem. The folder was real, and they knew it. Behind closed doors, Trump's legal team had been warned, if we push this too far, discovery will open the floodgates. She might release the rest. But the campaign couldn't back down now, not after what they'd called her, not after what they accused. They needed to look strong, not cornered. So they went forward. Inside the courtroom, things unraveled quickly. Within minutes of opening arguments, the judge requested an evidentiary review of the folder's contents. The defense provided not just authenticated signatures from the White House physician, but time-stamped security camera footage of the moment AOC's chief of staff received the envelope, from a now-retired staffer whose face appeared via live deposition. The judge squinted through his reading glasses at the affidavit and read aloud the title of the memo that had started it all. Cognitive Risk, Summary of Concerns. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Trump's lead attorney tried to pivot. Your Honor, the real issue is not the truth of the document, but the malicious way it was deployed for political gain. The judge cut in, sharp as a gavel strike. If it's true, it's not defamation. And if it's a matter of public concern, it's not a crime. You don't get to sue someone for holding up a mirror. A few in the gallery audibly gasped. AOC didn't smile. She didn't blink. She simply watched the weight of power shift, inch by inch. After a short recess, the ruling came swift and final. Motion to dismiss, granted. The court finds that the document in question is authentic, relevant to public interest, and its disclosure does not meet the standard for defamation. Case closed. The room didn't erupt. It hummed, like the low electric buzz before a thunderstorm. Outside the courthouse, the press mobbed AOC again. Someone shouted, "Do you feel vindicated?" Another, "Will you release more documents?" She paused, looked straight into the lens of a trembling camera. This was never about one man. This was about a system that banks on our fear. Today, the court affirmed something basic. Truth is not a weapon, unless you're hiding from it. The clip went viral. It was clipped, quoted, and stitched into TikToks. Teachers played it in civics class. Vets forwarded it to friends. Even independents who didn't like her politics said, "You know what?" She stood her ground. But the biggest shift wasn't online. It was in living rooms, dining tables, veterans' hospitals, school hallways. The very idea that someone could be sued for raising questions about health, about leadership, about competence, now felt dangerous in a different way. People weren't asking if AOC was too bold anymore. They were asking why it took her to say it at all. And Trump? He went quiet. No Truth Social post, no rally rant. Because when you swing at truth and miss, the echo stays louder than your punch. The marble corridors of the Senate echoed with rehearsed outrage. Ted Cruz, flanked by fellow conservatives, stood before a battery of microphones with the kind of smug certainty that comes from knowing your speech would make the evening news. "This is political theater, not public policy," he said, waving a thick packet of printed headlines. "Cognitive testing for candidates. This isn't about safety, it's about censorship. Plain and simple. And we will not fund it." Cameras clicked. Fox News leaned in. A few aides nodded like bobbleheads. Inside the chamber, the room was tense. The proposed legislation, born in the wake of the folder scandal, would require annual neurocognitive assessments for sitting presidents and major party nominees over the age of 70. The bill was controversial, but what made the moment combustible was who was scheduled to speak next. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She didn't storm into the chamber. She didn't carry the red folder. She didn't need to. Instead, she stood in silence at the podium for a full 3 seconds, a long time on the Senate floor. Just long enough for the room to realize this wouldn't be politics as usual. "I want to be clear," she began, her tone level, controlled, but unmistakably firm. "No one should be forced to defend their mind because of their age. But no leader should be shielded from accountability because of their power." Ted Cruz leaned back in his seat, arms crossed, half smirking. AOC continued scanning the room. "This isn't about revenge. It's about prevention. It's about trust. It's about not letting another American parent sit in front of a TV and recognize the signs their government pretends not to see." The chamber was still. Even the staffers stopped typing. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She told the story of a New York firefighter's widow who wrote her office after the folder hearing, how her husband, who died of early-onset Alzheimer's, used to get confused about the president's speeches, and not in the political sense. She recounted how she held that letter in her hands while watching denial after denial come out of the White House, as if the truth could be drowned in press releases. Then she looked directly at the Republican bench. "You say this is censorship," she said, "but what do you call it when a nation is forced to lie to itself in order to protect one man's pride?" Murmurs erupted. Cruz opened his mouth, but she didn't stop. "I didn't bring this folder to bring down a man," she said. "I brought it so the people could stand up." That was the sentence that broke the room. Some clapped. Others shifted uneasy. A few left their seats entirely. Reporters scrambled to tweet. And somewhere in a Midwest kitchen, a mother with a fading photo of her veteran father on the fridge whispered to the screen, "That's what I've been trying to say." Outside, the hashtag number sign, "Stand Up Not Cover Up," began trending. Inside, Ted Cruz tried one last jab, asking if this was just a publicity stunt disguised as concern. AOC turned toward him slowly, almost sympathetically. "Senator, concern doesn't need a disguise. Power does silence again. This one colder." She walked out of the chamber without looking back, knowing the cameras would follow, but more importantly, knowing the conversation had already shifted. The bill didn't pass that day, but something else did. A threshold, a moment where spectacle became substance, where Americans, regardless of party, began to ask, what do we owe each other when the truth is inconvenient? And that folder, no longer read, no longer silent, had done exactly what it was meant to do. Not end a campaign, but begin a conversation that could no longer be ignored. It arrived without warning. No return address, no name on the envelope, no official seal. Just a smooth, cream-colored envelope slipped under the door of AOC's office one late evening, after the building had thinned out and most staffers were already gone. She paused. The handwriting wasn't typed, but penned, precise and firm. The kind of penmanship you only saw in someone trained to hold power without trembling. She sat down at her desk. No cameras, no aides. Just her, the letter, and the lingering hum of fluorescent capital light above. She unfolded it. No greeting, no introduction, just a message that landed like a whisper between ribs. "You didn't humiliate him. You gave voice to what the rest of us couldn't bear to say. Some of us tried. We were told to stay loyal. Others watched, silently ashamed. But in that hearing, you did what a room full of generals, advisors, and career politicians could not. You spoke the truth, without cruelty, without spectacle, without flinching. And for that, you've done more for the dignity of that office than the man ever did himself." Signed, a former cabinet member. A chill ran through her, not because she feared it was a trap, but because in that moment it hit her. Someone who once sat in that inner circle, someone who likely flew on Air Force One, who had briefings in the Situation Room, who probably stood only feet from the nuclear codes, had watched that hearing and said finally, it wasn't flattery, it wasn't politics, it was confession. She read it again, slower this time, parsing every syllable, every careful stroke. The line, "You gave voice to what the rest of us couldn't bear to say," echoed in her chest. This wasn't just a compliment. It was a kind of quiet repentance, and in it, she saw just how far the rot had spread, not in ideology, but in silence. It had taken someone outside the circle, someone young, brown, female, and uninvited by history to say what the powerful only dared to mumble behind closed doors. And now here they were, writing her in the shadows. But even in the shadows, truth moves. She folded the letter slowly, sliding it back into the envelope like it was something sacred. Not for the press, not for Twitter, not even for her closest allies. This was between her and a conscience that had finally found its voice, even if it still needed to hide behind anonymity. Outside, Washington continued its daily theater. Cameras still fought for angles. Analysts still spat spin. But AOC sat still, hands resting atop the letter, feeling both the weight of the words and the unbearable lightness of being believed. Not by her base, not by her supporters, but by someone who once sat at Trump's right hand. She thought of all the noise of the past week, the rallies, the denials, the memes, the legal threats, the pundits calling her either a menace or a modern-day Joan of Arc. But this letter, silent and unseen, felt louder than all of it, because it proved one thing. The folder didn't just expose a man, it exposed a culture, and someone from within that culture had just admitted as much. She didn't frame the letter. She didn't leak it. She didn't even tell her staff. She just tucked it inside a drawer, under a pile of community letters from Bronx teachers and veterans in Arkansas, and a high schooler in Kansas who said he wanted to run for office, because of what you showed me as possible. But something changed in her posture that night, something more rooted, like a tree that realizes its roots reach deeper than it thought. For weeks they had asked her, "What did you gain? Did you think this would help your career? Are you trying to run in 2028? And all she could think now was this. Sometimes history doesn't reward you with titles. Sometimes it just leaves you a letter from someone who was once too afraid to speak, but now grateful you did. They expected fire. They expected AOC to walk into that high school auditorium with a storm behind her, with the sharp cadence of victory echoing in every sentence. Instead, she entered like a librarian arriving before first bell, quiet, measured, almost soft. No security parade, no flashing cameras, no chants or fanfare. Just her, a weathered red folder in her hand, and the kind of silence that doesn't settle. It charges. The auditorium was full. Rows of teenagers, faculty, and community members packed shoulder to shoulder, their eyes tracking her every move. Some had skipped lunch. Some had canceled soccer practice. A few clutched notebooks in case she said something quote-worthy. Most just sat frozen, wondering, what is she about to do now? She didn't take the podium. Instead, she walked past it. To the center of the stage stood a lone stand, like one you'd play sheet music on in a recital. AOC gently set the red folder atop it, fingers lingering over its surface like she was saying goodbye to something that had both burned her and built her. Then she turned to the crowd. "I'm not giving a speech today," she said simply. "I've done enough of that." Whispers rippled, but she didn't pause. She scanned the audience. "You've heard enough sound bites. You've seen the headlines. You've watched the noise. But this," she tapped the folder, "this wasn't meant for ratings. It wasn't meant to humiliate. It wasn't even meant to go public. It was meant to protect you, to inform you, to remind you that truth doesn't always scream. Sometimes it just waits for someone to read it out loud." She looked down, then back up. "And so today I'm not reading it. You are." That's when the volunteers stood. 10 students, one from each grade level, from freshmen to seniors, stood up slowly from the audience and walked toward the stage. Not actors, not speech kids, not the usual faces, just students who had been asked one thing days prior. Would you be willing to read something that matters even if no one claps when you're done? They lined up beside the stand. One by one, they approached the folder, opened it, selected a page, and read. Passages about the cognitive health evaluation, not dramatized but clinical. Paragraphs that described episodes of confusion, mistaking foreign leaders' names, briefings repeated 3 times a day. Pages signed by physicians, notes withheld from public release for national morale. Words like risk, decline, and irreversible. But the most chilling were the words not highlighted, dismissed, classified, do not escalate. As they read, the room stayed silent. No applause, no gasps, just a suffocating stillness, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Some students' voices trembled. One stopped halfway, blinking fast, and handed the page to the next. No one judged. They understood, because the power wasn't in how the folder was delivered. The power was in who was finally allowed to read it. Not officials, not elites, not political pundits, but kids. The generation that had grown up watching this man tweet policy like punchlines. Now they were reading about the costs, and when the last student stepped back, no music played. No graphics lit up. AOC didn't take the mic again. She simply walked back to the folder, closed it slowly, then turned to the crowd. I brought this into Congress because too many people were willing to protect power instead of people, she said, voice calm but cutting. But today, this folder no longer belongs to Capitol Hill. It belongs here. She handed it to the principal. For the civics department, she added. The students didn't cheer. They didn't need to. They stood taller. Because sometimes silence isn't emptiness. It's clarity. And in that moment, a high school auditorium, not a courtroom, not a news studio, not a political arena, became the place where truth landed, without applause, without armor, without agenda, just a folder, and a generation, finally trusted with it. No background music, no effects, no sensational headlines running along the bottom of the screen. Just a blank live stream frame, black background, and a single line of text. Starting soon, nearly 1 million people were already waiting. The viewer count kept climbing by the second. There had been no press release, no teaser article, no preview tweet. Just a quiet post from AOC's page. Tonight, one last word. When the image finally appeared, she sat alone. No table, no banners, no staff behind her. Just AOC, face solemn, gaze steady, dressed in a dark slate shirt with no jewelry. The simplicity hit harder than any opening line. Somewhere in the flood of comments, someone typed, "It's the silence before the scream." Tens of thousands clicked the heart icon. But she didn't scream. She didn't accuse. She didn't claim victory. AOC began with a truth everyone had felt, but few dared to speak. I don't celebrate this. Not at all. I wish I had never needed to do this. She didn't read from a script. She didn't glance down. Her eyes stayed fixed on the lens, as if she were looking each viewer in the eye, not as a politician, but as a citizen facing others who had once felt powerless in the shadow of power. This isn't about me being right and them being wrong. It's not about sides winning or losing. It's about when we started treating lies as more comfortable than truth. About when a leader's mental clarity became a private matter instead of a public responsibility. She paused, just for a moment, but long enough for everyone watching to feel their breath slow. I know I've been called a destroyer, a woman who set fire to democracy, but I didn't set anything on fire. I turned on the light, and if that light made people see what they were trying not to, then the problem was never the light. It was the darkness we got used to. Over 3 million people were watching now. The live chat was nearly frozen from overload, but she didn't glance at it. Her focus never wavered. Her face didn't smirk. She didn't glow with pride. There was only clarity, the quiet strength of someone who did what had to be done, knowing full well the cost. This fight wasn't supposed to start with me. It should have been raised years ago, when he first confused the names of his closest advisors, when health assessments were buried under the excuse of national morale, when women in the West Wing were told to smile instead of speak. I was just the last one who refused to keep looking away. One final pause. Behind her, nothing but a plain wall. But in her eyes, people could see the outline of a country waiting to be reminded of itself. Then she closed, not with a rallying cry, not with a #ready line, but with a sentence that would outlast the headlines, that educators, journalists, and teenagers would quote for years to come. We're not here to destroy. We're here to stop forgetting what matters. The room is quiet. Carpeted floors absorb every step. There's no crowd here, no press badges or campaign buttons. Just slow footsteps, occasional murmurs, and long stares. In the corner of the National Archives Annex, where artifacts of conscience, not conquest, are preserved, sits a lone wooden chair. No velvet rope around it. No sign forbidding photos. Just a clean spotlight above and a small bronze plaque below. Next to it, inside a temperature-controlled glass case, rests the folder. Yes, that folder. The manila cover slightly curled at the edge. The handwritten label still intact. Cognitive Observations. Executive Office. It's not flashy. No red wax seal. No shocking design. But its presence is heavier than any headline it ever created. Visitors don't speak loudly here. A father nudges his daughter to read the placard. An older woman places her palm gently on the glass, not to touch, but to remember. Above the exhibit, etched in soft steel, the caption, "Truth doesn't always speak. Sometimes it just sits, waiting to be seen." It doesn't scream. It doesn't beg for applause. It simply is. A symbol of the moment when one folder forced a nation to look inward. Not left or right, not blue or red, but inward, at what it means to be informed, to be brave, to tell the truth even when it shakes the floorboards of power. And the chair? It stays empty, not because no one dares to sit, but because some truths are bigger than anyone who tried to carry them. It's not the silence that's haunting. It's what it took to finally hear it. Sometimes the hardest truths aren't the loudest. They're the ones sitting quietly in plain sight, waiting for someone, anyone, would have stopped pretending they're not there. Watching this unfold reminded me that leadership isn't always about making noise. It's about choosing courage when silence is easier. Like AOC, we each face moments where we must decide, do we protect comfort or do we protect truth? Her act wasn't about humiliation. It was about humanity. And in that stillness, in that empty chair, many of us saw pieces of ourselves, our families, our fears. So I ask you, when you see something that feels wrong, will you speak up or sit down? If this story touched you, don't let it stop here. Like, share, and subscribe to Alexandria Rising Stories, where every voice matters and every story echoes far beyond the screen. This story is a fictionalized and dramatized narrative created for educational, inspirational, and storytelling purposes. While it may be inspired by real public events, people, or societal issues, it includes imagined dialogue, reconstructed scenes, and character interpretations meant to highlight broader themes of justice, dignity, and resilience. Any resemblance to actual events or individuals beyond public knowledge is purely coincidental. We do not intend to defame, mislead, or harm, but to invite reflection and meaningful conversation. Thank you for watching Alexandria Rising Stories.